Welcome to End of Life University podcast, where we share real talk about life and death. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt, and this is episode number 301. Thank you for joining me here today. In just a moment, I'll be playing an interview I did with Dr. Joshua Black about grief dreams, and I'm really excited to share this with you. I loved our conversation, and so I can't wait for you to learn more about grief dreams. But before we get to that, I wanted to remind you, if you listened to episode 300 last week, that I have a new podcast that just came out 1 week ago called What Really Matters: Everyday Spirituality. So this podcast really talks about how we live a spiritual life, particularly for those of us who are not religious. And so we don't have a religion that informs how we learn and grow and transform spiritually, but the universal spiritual principles that can inspire us to become our best selves and live a better life. So really, the podcast is about my own personal journey of learning about spiritual concepts and applying them in my life, and what I'm learning on the road on my own path. I'm sharing that with you so that hopefully you can also be inspired and to do your own work and your own growth spiritually. So the podcast is What Really Matters, and you can find it right now on Spotify, Google, and several other lesser-known platforms. It isn't playing yet on Apple Podcasts at the time of this recording, but hopefully it will be posted there soon. It just takes a while to go through the process of getting it approved there. So check out What Really Matters, especially if you're interested in some of the spiritual lessons that we learn by facing up to death and our own mortality. Before I move on to the interview, I'll remind you that this podcast and What Really Matters are both supported through generous donations on my page at Patreon, patreon.com/EOLU. Thank you so much to all the donors out there who've been making small monthly contributions to keep my podcasts on the air. And if you're new to this idea, you can go to that Patreon page and learn about the bonuses that you can receive for becoming a patron. And you'll discover that it's really only a couple of dollars a month to chip in to help make a huge difference for me in terms of keeping these podcasts going. So again, that page is Patreon, patreon.com/EOLU. I hope you'll check it out. And now we'll move on to the interview with Joshua Black. Stay tuned after the conversation, and I'll come back with a few takeaways and to say goodbye. So here we go. Today, I'm so excited to welcome my special guest, Dr. Joshua Black. Dr. Black is a grief researcher, speaker, author, consultant, online course instructor, and host of the Grief Dreams podcast. He has focused all of his MA and PhD research in psychology on investigating dreams in bereavement, also known as grief dreams, and continuing bonds from many types of losses, including prenatal loss and pet loss. Dr. Black is considered one of the world's leading academic experts in grief dreams, and he is focused on raising awareness of grief dreams due to a lack of academic research in this field. You can learn more about his work at his website, which is griefdreams.ca. So, Joshua, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I've been so excited to talk to you ever since I first read about your work, because I've been really intrigued with this idea of grief dreams, because I've had some myself and I know other people who have had them as well. So I can't wait to learn from you. But I was hoping you'd start by just telling us your own story and how you got interested in doing this research.
Yeah, I think most people in the field, it's not something that you're trained to go into unless maybe, your parents had something like were in the funeral business or something, or were into to helping the bereaved. But for me, I actually wanted to be an elementary school teacher, and I was in university and striving to do that. And then all of a sudden, like it was my fourth year. It took 5 years to finish that undergrad degree. So it was my fourth year, and my dad suddenly died. And it was the first time I had a significant loss in my life. And for me, it completely crushed me. It took all the wind out of my sails. It made life colorless, is the best way to put it. And I still remember like getting that phone call and just crying when I was told, like, 'cause, like the big story there is my dad had a lot of issues with alcohol and regulated emotions throughout my childhood. And so I was really afraid of him for most of my life. And we didn't really have a good relationship until probably a year and a half, 2 years before he died. And so I was finally getting the dad I always wanted, someone who seemed like he cared more, someone who was able to just talk to me like a friend kind of thing. And so that, it completely crushed me because that was gone now. And those memories that we were building was gone. And so I just started crying, and I didn't know how to process it at all. And I was making crazy decisions in my mind that I was going to do. Like I remember thinking in that short period of time before I went back to school that I was going to drop out of school and go to a trip to Israel, because that was one of the trips that we were always talking about, that he was going to show me around there because he just came back from a vacation there. And so I would have done it if it wasn't for a partner that I was with at that time, really settled me down and just sat with me and said, let's wait this out. let's finish your degree first. Then, at that time, make those decisions. And it was such great advice, because it was a near jerk reaction. And so what happened was I still crying. I was picking out the casket at my funeral. Not at my funeral, on my birthday. And then I did the eulogy the next day, and I was crying that point too. But then when I look back, I stopped crying the next day. And I went right back to school, went back to work, like almost nothing's happened. But I could feel everything changed in me. Like I was walking around in a gray world, best way to put it. And I couldn't feel joy, but I also wasn't feeling any kind of sadness. So I guess it would call it depression. And that lasted for like 3 months. And I wasn't trying to get out of it per se. I just thought this is what grief is, and this is the way it is now. And I wasn't searching for help, because I had issues with being vulnerable at that time and being a good male in our society. I never sought out any kind of help at that point. But what happened was I had this dream, and I wasn't asking for it. I wasn't wanting it. It's not even really consciously even know about it, to tell you the truth. Like looking back, I can see it in different films and stuff that I've watched. But at that moment, it wasn't something I was longing for. And so this is the dream. I was sleeping, and I was in my bedroom, and then everything in the bedroom was the same it was in waking life, which is very odd because most dreams are a little more bizarre in nature and things are a little out of place, but everything was the same. And then I saw my dad at the end of the room, and he looked so healthy and happy. Like he didn't have that heaviness to him that he did when I knew him in waking life. And so he was just different. So it wasn't even a memory. It was just something else. And I went up to him. He was smiling, and I said, I'm going to miss you, like acknowledging the loss. And I said, I love you. And we hugged. And when I woke up, something changed in me. And I can't even tell you what it is, because when I look back, I don't know. How did I go from this state of 3 months of depression, I guess you would call it, to a moment in time where you have this experience, and then now the color came back. It's like someone turned the light switch on, and then I could feel joy, and I can also feel sadness, as it turns out, as I move forward too. But that moment still stays with me in the mystery. And so I just sat at the edge of my bed, I remember, and just wondering, what was that? And I didn't interpret it as this is a visitation or this isn't. I just sat in the mystery of what just happened, on how I changed without any really conscious effort in the change. And when I look back now, like after doing like a lot of research and understanding the grief journey, I can see different parts that would have really helped me and what was probably blocking me from my grief. And so the first one was not being able to say goodbye to him was a big aspect of my loss and my grief journey. And that gave me that opportunity. And then also I never told him I loved him. And the last time probably I did that was maybe when I was 4. And so it was just something we never said to each other. I never heard it from him and he never said it to me, like when we were older. So that really showcased to me the importance of also voicing our love to others. And it changed me. I've seen this also as we move forward with other dreams, the importance of love in these dreams. And so that was a dream. It changed me. It completely changed me. But I wasn't, at that moment, I didn't say, you know what, I'm going to research this stuff because it's so interesting. What happened was I kept it and I kept it mine. I didn't share it with anyone. And I just finished school like I was planning on doing. And then when I got to become an elementary school teacher, I declined. And I didn't know why. I just didn't feel right at that point. And I think maybe because my dad really wanted me to become an elementary school teacher. I didn't have that pressure. But I think maybe there's something deeper in me that just knew there's something else for me. And that's when I decided to volunteer with the bereaved to try to to have some meaning in life, because I didn't know what I was going to do, but I know I wasn't supposed to be doing that. And that's when I started hearing these questions from the bereaved, which I never really asked because I had my own experience, but I never really asked any questions about it per se. They were wanting to know why they didn't have dreams and wanted to know, why they're dreaming of it in such a certain way, or why it was negative. And they're telling me concerns they had or dreams other people were having, or sharing these positive dreams. And when I went and looked at the research to try to help some of those people out, there wasn't anything there I could give them. So that was the moment where I said, should I do this? Because I'm already looking for meaning in my life. And I'm like, well, this could actually tie in with the grief stuff, but also I'm really intrigued because I had my own experience. And so once I gained the courage to change my identity and say, you know what, I'm going to try to be a researcher now, which is, I don't know if people understand how much effort and how much courage that took in me, because I was so afraid I wasn't good enough, because I never wanted to learn the statistics or research methodology. So I'm coming in or wanting to join a program knowing I'm 2 steps behind everyone else and what they expect. So once I found the right supervisor to be able to do that, it was a challenge, but I got through it, as you can tell.
Wow, that's such an interesting story. And I love hearing the details, even of the dream that you had, and the fact that it was a relatively simple dream, and yet it changed everything. And as you said, it addressed some of the unfinished business maybe that you had as part of your grief process. And it's just amazing how perfect the dream was to help you to give you what you needed at that time.
I know, right? That's the beauty of it. And it wasn't like something, even if someone said create a dream, I never would have created that dream, So it's like, I don't know what it was, but it was different than a lot of other dreams I've had. And it still sits in the mystery. And I'll remember that to the day I die. Because it was such an important aspect of my life and who I am today.
Yeah, I definitely remember I had a few dreams of my dad, and he died by suicide, which was very traumatic. And it took a few years before I actually had a dream of him. But it was so powerful for me. It's vivid still in my mind, every part of it. And they were short little dreams, nothing like epic, no saga or a long story, just a short interaction. But it was so, so powerful.
Can I ask you what the dream was, or what was the?
Yeah, the first dream that I had, which when you said that the dream itself was fixing what had been blocked in your grief process, I realized that just now, as you said that, oh, that's what my first dream was about. It was so simple. I just saw my dad. He was in the living room that I grew up with, the way it was decorated, the wallpaper that was on the wall and the furniture that was in the living room of their house. And he looked much younger than he was when he died. And he was just happy. He was full of light and vibrant, had so much beautiful energy around him. And he just reached his arms out to me and hugged me. And that's something my dad had never been able to do when he was alive was to actually give hugs. He was really uncomfortable with physical touch. And so two things that I needed to know in my grief process. One, is he okay? Because he died by suicide. And there was still always that question, like, what happens when someone ends their own life? You know, is he okay, or is he in a horrible place right now? And then, did he really love me? And so, yeah, that dream completely provided me with those answers, which was crucial for me in moving forward in my grief process.
Wow, that's so beautiful that you had that experience. And you said it's unfortunate that he died in such a tragic manner. And you sort of see that when you look at these dreams and that type of loss, you do see some interesting, I guess, categories or themes that do pop up. And some of them are just constant self of just, love itself. But sometimes people are longing for the answers to understand the why. They sometimes will get the deceased saying that, or deceased apologizing in different ways to them. And so it's really, it's fascinating to sort of see just what we need to work on in our lives and how these dreams do help us. Because I learn a lot about grief by looking at these dreams, more so than just asking about grief.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And it's amazing. This just happened in real time with me listening to you talk about it, that I have all these new insights now about dreams that I've had, which is, it is really fascinating when you enter into that world of dreams and knowing they come from our subconscious, but are we actually connecting with our loved ones on the other side? Are they sending us messages? And how does that all come together?
And that's the mystery of this topic, which I love. And the way that you say I do the research is it doesn't shy away from either of those topics. And for the most part, what people gain is just deeper understanding of that mystery. And it allows people to, whatever they believe, to still believe what that is. So the research really showcases that people that are spiritual or not are still having similar themes, which is, I think, really interesting when it comes to dreaming of the deceased. When it comes to these positive, comforting dreams, it's really about this love. And even if they're not spiritual, they're, say, an atheist, the deceased is still saying they're okay and that they're all right and that they love them. The major difference you'll see amongst, different types of religions will be maybe what is talked about or the scenery. So sometimes the deceased will be in heaven if they're Christian, or they'll talk about heaven in some way, or the dreamer will ask what heaven is like, kind of thing, and you'll get those responses. But yeah, at the end of the day, it could be just the mind working through some stuff, but or it could be the deceased who knows you really well because of what you're going through, and that's the dream, and that could be the visitation. And I don't know, but the only thing I do know is that if it's positive and it's helping you in your grief journey, let's ride with it. Let's just go with it. But if it's when it's distressing and you think it's, let's say, a haunting or a visitation, negative visitation, or something else, that's when I say, let's really sit down and talk about that, because that really can complicate your grief as you move forward.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. How common are grief dreams according to your research?
When I started, I thought they would be rare, just because no one talks about them. And I never once heard about it in any kind of grief training. And still to this day, most people don't talk about it. No one in thanatology is, bringing these up, and no one's researching them. So what do you, for just honest opinion, I would say, it'd probably be rare. So that was one of the most shocking things I found was when I did the research. And I want to sort of mention that when I did the research, I didn't collect it from a dream sample. So they didn't even know that I was collecting their dreams or going to be asking about their dreams. It was a study on grief. And so I wanted to be that way. So then the numbers would be a little more realistic in what they are. Because if we just study a dream sample, well, then maybe it's higher than just a regular sample of me going on grief. So anyways, after spousal loss, within the first year or two after loss, 86% of people report at least one dream of the deceased. Which is, you think about it, and it's so huge. And then you look at the fact that 10% of the population doesn't remember dreaming in general. So you knock that off, that 86, there's most people who are remembering their dreams are remembering one of these types of dreams, which is really interesting to me to sort of see. And then I did multiple studies on pet loss and also, miscarriages and pregnancy loss. And so after pet loss, 78% within the first 6 months. So I closed that window. So it was within the first week or to 6 months. What's that rate? 78%. So as it would have increased to a year or two, that probably would have increased to around the same numbers, like 86%. And then said after miscarriage and stillbirth, you have 58% within the first year of loss. And this is really interesting to me because after a miscarriage, you haven't seen the child, but yet you're dreaming of the child. So it's not a memory at all. So something else is, like I said, there's something beautiful going on there where you get a chance to see a child that never was born. And wow. That imagery and what people dream about in that is just fascinating to me. And they dream about the child at different ages, and they can even grow up as they would have. Like you see that also after if someone has a child loss, the deceased will grow up like they would have in waking life. So let's say they were died at, let's say, 2 years old. In 2 years, they're dreaming of them as if they're 4. And so it's just like these really interesting things that are that's going on in those experiences, and what that means for those people who are dreaming it is, it's beautiful to watch and to understand that there's almost, you have help in a way. And I think dreams in general are just like our best friend that gives us truth. Even the negative dreams has a lot of gems in it to give us the truth we need and the support we need when we just can't give it ourselves.
I think you're so right about that. I've always been really interested in my dreams, which I think has actually helped me remember them more because I've been fascinated by them. And so I've focused in on them and trying to remember them when I first wake up in the morning. But I agree with you. I've found dreams to be so helpful for me in understanding myself better. But you're right that the grief dreams that I've had have been a little different than other dreams. Like they stand out in such a vivid way.
Yeah. And that's, there's something going on there, and it'd be interesting to see, like in a sleep lab, what's actually going on in the mind. Like how is it different from a regular dream and those types of experiences? And, in time, hopefully we get there. But once again, it's going to be hard to catch one of these dreams too, because some people, the frequency varies widely. And sometimes people only have one dream their entire life, but it was a very vivid and memorable one. Other times, people have one every couple months. And it's just really interesting on why that is. And we can talk sort of about why some people dream more of the deceased than others. But I also want to sort of put a mention into children's dreams. So there has been one study, I didn't do this, but there has been one study that looked at children's dreams after parental loss. And what they found was 55% of children had a dream of their deceased parent. And I think that's also very important when we talk about this subject, that we also bring in kids, because they are first still trying to understand what dreams are. But these dreams can also complicate their understanding of death and also their grieving process. And many of these children had positive dreams of the deceased. But what's interesting is even those positive dreams are very distressing on them for different reasons. Just because of their interpretation of the dream. And I think that's sort of, when we talk about these dreams, there's the dream itself and what that can do. And I believe the dream itself does its own thing beyond interpretation. Then there's the benefits or the struggles people get through the waking life interpretation. So either the distress or the comfort they get from looking at that dream in waking life. So I think there's two parts to the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know on your website, it mentions that there are different types of grief dreams. So maybe we could cover that if you would just tell us a little bit about, I guess, what constitutes a grief dream and what types there are.
Yeah, so we talk about it before loss or after loss. So I really kind of, the more I hear about the topic, the more I have to relook at the understanding of what grief dreams are. But we'll talk about after loss right now. And so these are the dreams the moment after the individual has died. And so there's 3 forms. So the one is forms that are very symbolic of your waking state. And so an example of this would be you're walking by or running by a mountain and the mountain collapses on you. And it can represent your waking day struggles and how heavy the world is to you at this point in life. And so dreams reflect our waking life, and people really need to understand that, and research has shown that. And so that's what you would expect, from a dream of someone who's grieving, a negative kind of scenario like that. Then there's these other dreams where the deceased isn't in it, but someone mentions them, or there's scenery that is related to them some way. So a scenery could be either like the funeral home, or it could be the hospital in which they died at, something like that, or even the house they grew up in. And then there's the characters in the dream. So they could mention the deceased in some way, giving condolences or asking how you're doing. It could be, I've seen God, Jesus, angels, also letting them know that the deceased is okay. So like they're bringing in that. And then the last one that I see is what everyone really wants to talk about is these dreams with the deceased that are present. And so this can be in human form. I've seen, dreams that they were a cloud talking, they're an animal. Also, they're just talking through a phone is another thing, or some other object in the dream. So sometimes they're physically present, sometimes they're not. And so those are the dreams, after someone knows they're lost. And I'm just going to put in the fact that there are these dreams that I haven't looked at in a sense of research base, but you get them as you collect the data. And so they're not even like trying to like say, this is what it is, or to try to like whatever. It's just, it comes through just collecting these dreams in general, and just from people coming on my podcast. So there's these dreams that people have before they're actually aware that the individual has died, which is, I think, really interesting in many ways. So a situation would be they have a dream, looks very similar to a dream that someone would have afterwards, where the deceased is light. It's a very loving dream. The person's saying goodbye, something like that, and they love them. But yet when you ask the person, they didn't know prior to bed that the person has died. And when they wake up, they'll get a phone call, or they'll call someone to sort of see, and then they find out that the individual has died. And so for me, it kind of like makes me sit in the mystery of life. And then maybe there is a connection that we have with one another that goes beyond, Instagram and and the phone, but there's like a bond that's shared across time. I think that's kind of interesting to just think about, because like I know parents in general, like they would say there are moments in life where they just knew something was wrong with their child, and they called and there was. And so maybe there's this cord that we have with each other that, is like almost like a telephone in a way that helps us understanding. Or as someone would say, it could be a visitation dream. Either one is just fascinating in general, because it just allows us to realize we just don't know enough about what goes on in the human form, like who we are. That is still a mystery, and there's still stuff that we need to learn about. And then there's these anticipatory grief dreams. So these are dreams where someone knows someone is dying, and they're having dreams that resemble that in some way. I know A Monster's Call, it's a movie and a book. It's really basically all about an anticipatory grief dream that a kid's having. And so like this is also something to be aware of, because those dreams can really impact the individual's grieving process. And if we can look at those, we can help them work through some of that grief, so they can spend a more peaceful time one-on-one with the individual as they pass.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And as you're talking about those anticipatory dreams, during my years in hospice working with dying patients, a handful of times, and this only happened with patients that I felt a particular closeness to, but I would have dreams about 2 weeks before the patient died. I would have a dream in which I would see the patient in a totally healthy, healed form, in a way full of light, like you were describing, and not at all looking like they looked as our current patient. And even people, I'd never seen them when they were younger. I didn't know what they looked like when they were younger, but I knew somehow this was the person. And oftentimes they came with a message, either to say thank you or everything's going to be okay, something like that. And I felt, when it happened, I felt like I'm supposed to communicate this to the family, because for some reason the dream came to me, and that maybe the family wasn't able to receive the dream at the time. So I felt really motivated, like I needed to tell them about the dream, which was really frightening for me to actually tell someone I had a dream about their loved one. But I did because it was so powerful.
Come on, you didn't.
Tell them?
Did? Wow. That takes so much courage. Congratulations. I gotta just sort of say, wow.
I did tell them because it was, the very first time it happened, I attended the person's funeral, and during the funeral, the minister said, I'd like to offer a time for people to come up here if they want to say something, or if there's a message they need to communicate to the family. And no one went forward. And he said, I know there's someone here who has something that they need to share that would really help the family. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I feel like he's talking to me, because the dream I had was so beautiful and so sweet about their mother. And I felt like, how would I deprive them of hearing about this dream and keep it for myself? And because it wasn't a dream for me, I didn't really need the dream myself. Right. And so I went up and I talked about the dream, and I got so much the family came and hugged me and thanked me, and they were so grateful for it. So that kind of opened me up to the idea that maybe I'm getting the dream because I will have the courage to tell it to other people. So I did. But that happened maybe 5 times total.
That's amazing though. And I've heard that too. That's why I'm saying it takes a lot of courage, because I know a lot of people who have that experience and then they just don't share it because they don't want to be seen as crazy or to be judged. But yeah, I had an individual that shared an experience with me just on my newsletter. And she, as you're saying, she didn't really know the person too well. It was like an old acquaintance that they went to high school with. And she had this dream of a child, and the child has a message for the father. And so she got it. Basically, it was that, he was okay and they loved him and stuff, and he's having so much fun. And then she had this moment where, what do I do with that? Because he's telling me this is a message for his father, but she doesn't talk to him. It's not like that kind of relationship. They're just, linked in on Facebook. Anyway, so she asked all her people around her what she should do, and everyone told her not to do it. But yet the dream haunted her in the sense of this naggingness about she should do something with it. So finally she just reached out with courage and shared it with them, and it broke him down and said, this is the sign I've been longing for. He hadn't had a dream himself, and he was basically asking the universe or whatever for a sign that his son was okay. And that was his sign. And I was like, wow. It's you just don't know. It's just it's so crazy. These stories just makes me sit in the mystery. And I'm not saying people need to be spiritual to believe them. They just have to sit in the mystery of there's something else that we don't really know that's occurring. And there's probably a scientific explanation to it. And what it is, who knows? But there's that mystery that it's occurring. And that's beautiful, that if sometimes when people don't dream of the deceased, other people may have these dreams almost for them. And that's its own, I'm really curious to really study that more as I move forward in this work, because I think there's going to be a lot of answers to understand maybe why that happens.
Yeah. It is really fascinating. And I was just thinking, I had a dream of my cousin after she died, and we were at a wedding together in the dream, and she came and sat at my table, and I knew that she was dead, but I saw her whole family, her husband and her children were all at a separate table. And I said, oh, look, why don't you come and sit with them? They would love to see you. They're all there. And she said, no, it's not time yet. I can't go see them yet. I can only talk to you right now. And so wild. So that did kind of tell me there's something about who's ready for the dream, I guess, who's ready for it to happen. And there's something about timing and the right place and time and person, I guess. It's really interesting. I can just imagine how much you love listening to these stories.
Yeah, no, it's just even this story. I'm like, man, this is so amazing. And it just makes me smile because for me, I love dancing in the mystery, because I don't think we need to know everything to just appreciate the beauty of it. It's I can look at a flower and just realize I have no idea how that was made. Some water and some sun, but it's like saying you needed sleep and a brain, but we don't really understand what actually is going on and for it to create itself on what it is. And I think the same thing with these dreams, it's very mysterious, but it's so beautiful in what it's trying to do for our spirits and also other people that say we may not really know. But I think that's an important part too of just people who work in the hospice care, people who work in hospice or any other hospital at end of life care, that they do dream of their deceased patients. And some of them are, as you said, like you don't really maybe have that connection, but they're dreaming of them in certain ways. And I had someone on my podcast a couple of years ago, actually, and he would dream of these very significant people in his life that he had like a connection with. And the dream gave him reassurance that he did a good job and that he's valued in that profession. And I think that's something I think we all, when you look at, maybe what the reason for that dream is just that I think we're so busy in life, and especially with work and trying to deal with our own grief and the changes in life, that sometimes we forget who we are and the impact we have on people. And these dreams can showcase that to us, to remind us on the impact that we are having. And that's a beautiful thing to remember.
I love hearing you say that as a researcher, you appreciate the mystery, because I think that's the perfect attitude for actually anyone doing research, because you have to be able to just take in all this information, but know that there's something way bigger than just what we can see and bigger than we can even comprehend in what you're doing. And I really appreciate that you have that approach to your research.
Thanks. I think that's what's needed in the research. And I think that, maybe one of the reasons why it was never really studied, because when people think about these dreams, what a lot of people will jump right to is visitation dreams. And, I really, cringe when I hear that word, because that's interpretation of an experience. It's not the experience. And when we start labeling something like that, other people, say researchers who, I would say that there's not when people are researchers, especially in psychology, there's not many people who are spiritual in that field. So there may be like, oh, why would I do that? Like, it's just going to cause people to think that I'm studying visitation dreams or something. And, and at the same point, it's like, you're minimizing what it actually is. There's like this huge landscape that I've seen, and I didn't know, like, really starting out, but it's really when I started doing the research, I really realized how big this landscape is. And the interpretation of the dream and it being a visitation is very small. And what I've seen when people have referred to dreams as visitations, or to trying to tell people when one is and when one isn't, it's really destructive in their own grief process, because I still don't even know. And, like if there was one, I still don't know, because I've seen a vast array of dreams and also experiences that people have shared with me on why that dream was a visitation for them. And then someone else who has a similar dream would say, no, that wasn't. And so it's when we start labeling and boxing things in, it's very difficult. And so when someone asks me if what I think of the dream, I just sort of ask them, what do you believe? Because that's the most important thing. And if you don't know, that's okay. Let's just sit in the beauty of it if it's positive. But people who also have negative dreams will also see these dreams as hauntings or negative visitations. And people forget that when you start labeling a specific dream as something, people will take it, all dreams are like that then, or all dreams mean that. And we really have to teach people discernment in this field and in this, when we look at dreams.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, how often do you see people who have had negative dreams?
This is the interesting part. So when you look at dreams in general, like the research has shown that people will more likely dream something negative than positive in their sleep. And the reason for that is because people are just consciously worried and stressed in life. And so, the dream is really trying to digest that stuff. Also, what you listen to and what you watch before bed has an impact in what dreams you have. So, dreams can have this very passive quality to it in the sense of our waking life. So the things that just go on will filter into our dreams. And after trauma, research has shown that dreams in general are even more consistently negative, and they'll have even more nightmares, with that. So you would think after grief, so after someone's died, it can be very traumatic in nature, but it'd be somewhere in between. And so, but what's interesting, when you actually look at the data of all those people that I've sort of surveyed, what's interesting is when the deceased is in the imagery, something is different, because these dreams tend to be positive in nature by like a landslide. And that is so surprising because it doesn't go with the traditional dream research. So there's something else going on here beyond what we know or what we can really understand. And so just say for an example, like after like spousal loss, it was like around 92% of people who had a dream had a positive dream, and around 40% had a negative dream experience. But what's interesting is those who had a negative dream of the deceased, so this would be like them dying again or chasing them, something like that. They also had a positive dream in the time frame. And I need to do more longitudinal research to understand when those dreams occurred. But my theory is people would have more of these negative dreams in the beginning of loss as they're trying to process their grief. And then as that grief is processed, they have more of these positive dreams. Then the same thing with pet loss is around 90, I think it was 91%. That had a positive experience, and around 25%, I believe, it was a more negative experience that they had. So once again, completely, different than what I would have expected going in. Even though I had a positive dream, I would have expected more people to have negative dreams of the deceased. So there is something different going on here. And I think this is where the people sort of say, well, it must be out of this world, right? It could be, or it could be that something else is going on to help us work through and survive this crazy life that we're a part of.
Yeah. And from what you're saying, it sounds like dreams can evolve and change. Our grief dreams can evolve and change over time, perhaps as our grief process is evolving.
Yes, it's so true. And you see this actually just with interviews and just with conversations I've had with people. Even my own dreams have changed like that. And so in the beginning, these dreams really reflect and try to help you work through your grief in some way. And there's many things we could talk about with that, by, really processing the trauma of the event, maintaining these continuing bonds that are very beneficial through loss, or even helping you with like these grief issues and regulating some emotions. That really what happened with me, right? But then as you work through and start to heal through some of the loss, what's interesting is these dreams will start to appear more when you're stressed and you're dealing with something in waking life that isn't related, quote unquote, to the death anymore. So this may be a divorce that's going on. And so the people will have a dream of comfort from the deceased, reassuring them in some way, or even like the pandemic. So there's been a lot of activity and a lot of conversation about dreams in the pandemic. People have to understand that you're missing a huge conversation about this, is that a lot of people are having dreams of the deceased in the pandemic as a way of comforting them and to survive this craziness that we have. So a lot of people are finding that they're just spending time with the deceased. So there's like increased dreams of just being together. And I can see how that will play if someone's especially lonely and they're sort of trapped in their house or something. These dreams can be very beneficial to get through the day and to get through these really dark times. Other dreams of the deceased would even help problem solve the situation and refocus their attention. Or even I've seen a dream where an individual just was checking in to see how the person was doing in the pandemic, which is, I think, amazing.
Wow.
And then from there, you move forward, and at end of life, you'll see these dreams again too. And the difference is these dreams will help individuals, as you probably already know with the hospice stuff, that they help individuals transition from life to death, to be able to let go a little more easily. And for those people who are spiritual, to know that they're going to be someone there waiting for them when they die. So it's really interesting on how they change over time also. And so this is just the mysterious world of grief dreams.
Wow. It's just so fascinating to hear about it and learn about what you're seeing. And I'm sure it's really interesting putting all of this together, but I'm wondering, why do you think it's taken so long for anyone to start studying this and to really look into these grief dreams?
I'm still asking that question. I don't know, but all I know is maybe the world, time, I don't know how the world works, and I don't know when things need to appear. But when you look at just, dreams and visions at the end of life, well, that's starting to get some traction right now, which is very interesting because the people at, the Hospice Buffalo, mm-hmm. they're like 20 minutes away from where I studied these dreams. And that for me, it's just a weird, in anywhere in the world that these two topics could be talked about, they're like right beside each other.
Wow.
and we didn't know about each other when starting. And so wow. I think there's maybe a moment in time where these things are just needed for our culture. But I can understand dreams in general have been really devalued in Western culture. And for a lot of the times, there's been a religious neglect of this topic in many ways. And so I think a lot of people try to they saw this as more of a demonesque or a negative kind of form. And that could be because a lot of people probably just had nightmares in general. But because a lot of people didn't understand these dreams, I can see them demonizing them. And you see that through just, throughout time. And then I think because, when it comes to this maybe researchers, where does the funding go? Who's going to fund this study? Because many people, when they look at the study, they jump to a spiritual aspect or something like that, but it doesn't really you don't have to look at it through that lens. You can just look at it as from a psychology perspective and what's going on here. And so I think that's probably part of it too, is the funding and just someone maybe having the experience at the right time. And for me, it was right before, a career decision-making moment. And other people, I think when they go into school, they already sort of have, or they go into their PhD or master's, they already have an idea of what they want to study, and if it's attachment or whatnot. And it kind of separates itself from doing something unique and pioneering the field. And the other big area, another issue on that, is you got to find someone that will do this research, allow you to do this research. And if you're in, let's say, I don't know, some other, you're going to try to apply to a program, you're trying to do something that the professor, your supervisor, already does. And you're trying to my supervisor sort of always said, most people just, when they go to a PhD, they're finding new things, but they're just cleaning up the street that's already paved ahead of them. And so that's like finding a professor and you're cleaning up some of their work and you're developing some new things. But she said, with me, there's no pavement. You're just knocking down trees and making your own way. And, there is beauty to that, but you needed someone that was able to do that. And I was just so lucky. And it was just I look back and I don't know how it even happened, but to be able to have two supervisors, one in my master's that first allowed me to touch on the subject. She was a dream researcher, which is rare in itself in the field. And I was able to do my master's with her. But the PhD, the supervisor, she dealt with trauma, and it relates kind of, but at the end of the day, it was beyond anything that she was even doing. But she was also retiring, which had a caveat in there in the sense of, I think that's maybe one of the reasons she gave it a shot, because she's not trying to get tenure, because one of the things with a professor is they also will get their name on your publications. And so whatever you do, they're also tied to. And so, but this, she's retiring. She doesn't care. She had her own dream that really made her interested in researching the topic herself. But I don't know if she was in her third year as a prof or 10th year as a prof, if she would have really even done that either. So it's just the things lined up for it to now be a thing that people can now, I think, have the evidence to then support why they should be doing this as they move forward in research. But anyways, sometimes it just takes one person to be able to actually spend a lot of time on it before other people say it's safe.
Wow, which is amazing to me. I mean, to think, you are the actual pioneer of this work, and you're laying down the pavement. I guess it's pavement at this point. I don't know, but other researchers will follow after you and add to the body of work that you're creating right now, which is wonderful, especially as I hear the benefits that are there for all of us to learn about our own dreams and to hear about other people's grief dreams. Oh, because that's actually one thing I wanted to know. Do you find it's helpful for people just to hear about someone else's dream, even if they don't know anything about who's in the dream or have any connection to it? Just hearing about the fact that other people have grief dreams?
I think so. And it really depends on what it is, right? Because you collect both, right? You see negative dreams. If you don't know what actually is going on, it may scare you. But those positive dreams, there can be a lot of beauty in them. And I gain a lot of wisdom actually from researching the topic, which is, a beautiful thing in itself, because the deceased, they don't say a lot, but when they do, it's such a beautiful thing. And it can really change your own understanding of your own life and what your focus is. And they say these really great one-liners, and I'm just like amazed that they even like said it, because I'm like, that's so powerful. Like, man, like I could make a bunch of t-shirts with these quotes that I get from the deceased. And, you know, that's a very beautiful thing. But, you know, like when sharing it, the interesting thing is, if, let's say you have the dream and you share it with someone, if the person themselves hasn't had their own dream, they may become worried or jealous. And it's like, how do you manage those feelings? Because that's also part of the grief process. And that's one of the reasons why I did work on trying to give people a scientific explanation on why some people don't remember these dreams and other people do. And so one of the reasons for that is replicated in multiple studies, was that dream recall in general is the most important factor for this. And so, as we already talked about, 10% of the population doesn't remember dreams. And when you ask those people that say, I really want one, I haven't had one yet, you ask them, well, how often do you dream? Most people will say not very often at all. And so now you have an explanation to say, you know what, well, then how are you supposed to get one of these types of dreams? There are ways, you know, for people to increase their dream recall. But what I like to sort of tell people is that, you know, we're still learning about the topic, but you're probably dreaming about them, but just not remembering, because we're all dreaming in the night. It's just that remembering part is there's an interesting thing. As you said, it's about timing. It's about a lot of stuff for when they remember that type of dream. And so if people do want to sort of remember more dreams, the easiest way is to value them. And that's the one thing our culture doesn't do really good at, is telling us the importance of these dreams and what these dreams can do for us, and to make us aware of who we are. It just really is not in our training, I guess, to be human or to be functioning. And so just by, you know, listening to even this episode or other podcasts on dreams, and to talking about your dreams, and especially writing them down. So if you have one, write it down, because what you're saying and you're telling yourself is that I want to remember these now. And maybe they weren't important before, but I want them to be important in my life now. And you'll see that they actually, you know, research has shown that those dreams will increase. Your recall of these dreams will increase as you move forward. I will say that if you are grieving, you're probably going to remember more negative dreams in general. Not because the deceased is probably not going to be in every one of those. And so it's just to be aware of that, and to be able that there are tools to be able to help you work through some of those dreams. And so I also offer, you know, one-on-one grief dreams consulting for those people who are just having difficulty trying to understand how it relates to waking life, because it is very difficult to understand your dream language, because you can't just Google what does a swan mean and figure it out. Like, dreams are very unique in the sense of to you. So your symbol of a swan is going to be different than someone else's. But plus, there's so many other variables that are at play that make a story. It's like having each thing's its own word in a sentence, and you're trying to figure out what's it trying to convey to you. And so it's just difficult, but, you know, people can do it if they, you know, give themselves enough time as they move forward.
Wow. That's really interesting. So I would encourage people, if you want to try to remember more of your dreams in general, it seems like if everyone works on that, they may be more likely to remember a grief dream if they have one. And it sounds like listening to your podcast, Grief Dreams, would be really helpful for people.
I think so. It's a great conversation to just also normalize the topic and hear other people's experiences of grief, so you feel that you're not alone, and you can maybe relate and gain some wisdom as you work through your own.
Where can people find your podcast?
Well, really anywhere. There's a lot of links. If they go to my website, griefdreams.ca, a lot of stuff is on there. And if they really are interested in the topic itself, I developed an online training course for people to really gain the insights needed to understand how these dreams reflect waking life, and how to bring up the topic if they are a clinician or someone who works with the bereaved, to sort of feel confident to be able to do this. So it's 9.5 hours. It takes some time, but it's there now. And so if people are really interested in the topic, that's the place to go to.
That sounds really helpful for people who are working with patients and families dealing with death and loss, to be able to have an understanding at least of dreams, because I would think if we're all open to hearing about dreams, that we're more likely to help people feel comfortable talking about them.
It's so true. And I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to why aren't people or researching this more often, people aren't asking the question. If people ask the question, if researchers even ask, like people who spend time with the bereaved, just ask the question, they'll be shocked to hear the answers. And you're like, why didn't you share that before? Right. And a lot of people keep these hidden for multiple reasons. And that's sort of, I don't know if I really said it, but because a lot of people fear judgments on what other people view it as. So if someone who's not spiritual tells a dream and someone says that it's a visitation, they close up and they don't want to share that dream ever again. And vice versa. If someone is spiritual and they tell someone who's not, and they say, oh, that's just a reminder, you're not over your loss, that closes them up and they don't want to share it again. So it's really about providing that safe space for people to ask the question and to hear and to see what impact that has on the individual. Because it's really surprising the lack of space that people do share. Like I've had experiences just with, Christians in general, since that's basically the place I really grew up knowing a lot about. Well, some pastors will say it's the devil in disguise, where other pastors will say it's God. And so there's this unknowing of how to really even talk about the subject in religions because of the vastness of the experiences that people can have. So, but the biggest thing is to really just try to ask the question and to not judge the response.
Yeah. Wow. And again, just hearing that it can be so beneficial to people who experience the dreams if we can help them feel comfortable with the fact that they've had a dream, and it can be healing and help them with their own process. I think it's something we really should all know something about and be prepared to deal with. And so I'm really excited about the research that are you still doing more research? Is it ongoing?
I'm still publishing. I'm not currently doing research right now. It's publishing really all my other stuff. I have two more, one on the miscarriage study and then also a review article that's coming out. And then right now I'm just like collecting some pandemic dreams just to sort of see the landscape of what's going on right now. And hopefully, as you said, like I move forward in the future, I can start doing this research again. But right now I can continue to do research, but my goal isn't about doing more research. I hope other researchers will jump on board. My goal now is to disseminate the research as best I can so people can understand the importance of that and be able to ask those questions. And like, people just need to understand, like, people aren't trained in this subject in any kind of thanatology program and any kind of bereavement training. And so like, that's my goal, because the base of the research is done for it to be valued. Now my goal is, how can I get the world to value it? And so that's where my focus is right now, more than actually I need to do more research. I think it will come, but my goal now is to let's talk about the subject in the world.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's why you're willing to come on podcasts like this and share this information with us. And so I'm happy if I can play some small part in helping you increase that awareness.
You do. And I appreciate everyone who takes the time to have me on. And let's say this shows for you to have me on. It's a beautiful moment for me to just have an opportunity to disseminate some of the knowledge. And you were so interested, and you had your own dreams, which I think were phenomenal too. To be able to hear that, just like, it makes me like move and shake in the world, just because like, you just don't know, what one interview can do for someone, but you just continue to do it because it's needed. And so for you to have a platform for me to be able to be a part of that and share some knowledge, I'm grateful. I'm truly grateful.
Well, I want to remind our listeners to check out your website, griefdreams.ca, and find out how you can learn more. Listen to Grief Dreams podcast. Maybe you want to take the online course or do some one-on-one consultations. And I wish you all the best, Joshua, as you bring your message forward to the world.
I appreciate that. And thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, you're welcome. And hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Of course. You have to tell me if you get any more of these dreams.
Yeah, for sure. I will. All right. Take care.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Joshua Black. I'm really fascinated by this idea of grief dreams. As you heard, having had a number of them myself, and there have been even more than the ones I talked about in this episode. But I think it's a very promising field of research because of the fact that grief dreams are so hugely beneficial to the people who have them and really help soothe grief when they occur. And I liked his suggestions for being more likely to remember dreams by just paying attention to them and by setting the intention that I want to remember my dreams when I wake up, and then keeping a dream journal handy at the bedside so you can write down the dream as soon as you have one. And the more you do that, the more it helps you get in the habit of waking up and holding on to those little threads of memory from whatever dreams you were having so that you can record them. And also the fact that he said, don't be afraid of negative dreams, because we might shut down our own dreaming process or our remembrance of dreams out of fear of having a negative or frightening dream. And I think we should view our dreams as helpful aspects of our psyche that are pushing us toward healing and growth, and not be frightened by them. So anyway, I hope you'll start listening and watching for your own dreams that may come up that are helpful to you. And also check out Joshua Black's podcast and take a look at his website so that you can learn a little bit more about grief dreams if you're interested in that. So tune in to this podcast next week for another interview. And if you're interested, check out What Really Matters on Spotify and Google and see if you like the content that I'm posting there as well. Also, if you enjoy this content that I'm sharing here, consider recommending it to other people or sending someone an episode that you think might be helpful to them. You can also help out the podcast by subscribing on whatever platform you happen to listen on, and then leaving a rating and a review for the podcast so that it gets shown to more people who are searching for this kind of content, and helps us grow our community of people who are interested in improving the way we manage the end of life. So until next week, remember, we're here for love. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life may bring your way, and love each and every moment of your very precious life. Bye-bye.